that we can have in the Sargassum and still make it useful for the 5%? And then the second question is it possible with the present equipment to have just 5%?
At times. And what I'm hearing is there's days when they can't separate it from the beach, much less from the sand.
If your beach is flat, like let's say you have once you have a rain event, you get a lot of gunnels in your beach, and then you come in with your front end loaders and you're trying to pick up, a day or a day and a half old sargassum, you're going to get, your percentages of sand climb. And that's primarily why both the cities used to go in with their motor graders, scrape down the beach face to get the beach face flat. Then they let that sargassum wash up on that flat beach face, and they come in with the front end loaders and skim. But really now, once the sargassum's been on the beach for a couple days, it's hard to target less than 5%.
I was under the impression that there was a method to be able to take, when you front end load, put it into basically a tumbler and have the sand fall out.
Trommel.
Yeah, tumble screens. Same thing as composters.
But that's not a current piece of equipment. I think the
Yeah,
question
that's not
Shelley had
current.
was that with current equipment, current that's being used, but you're right. That sounded like a...
Plus, I don't think that it would really be feasible when you're looking at moving the volumes of sargassum. When you get an event that's 1.5 feet, 2 foot high, I mean, we can't be tumbling sargassum. It's just not economically feasible.
There's still a lot of other hurdles, too, beyond that, because realistically, the private landowner owns to mean high tide. So therefore, you have a lot of issues as far as that goes, permission from them to remove it. And say if they're removing it from areas that are GLO land, which there is some of that that's leased back to the local jurisdictions, I think there would probably still be a lot of things that would have to be looked at as far as the conditions of the lease and other things in that.
You were with GLO, right?
Yes.
Okay, a question that came up when this was, I think maybe you mentioned it earlier, about ownership of the mean high tide. That's true, yes, but doesn't the public access go to either the vegetation line or 200 feet from mean low water?
It's an easement.
It's an easement,
And the
yes.
public has a right to access and access that beach. And the local governments have to maintain it in a manner where the public can use it.
Right.
Yes.
That's what we're operating under
But
now.
still,
that
our
easement.
rules specifically say that anything that is moved for beach maintenance has to stay between the line of vegetation and mean high tide. So any sand can't be removed from the beach. It's not supposed to be removed from the beach. I mean, most of all the stuff that they can remove it temporarily, but it has to come back to the beach system. And most of the organic material, generally we want that to come back into the beach dune system.
Okay,
So,
but this is true whether the landowner is cooperative or not.
yes. But still, I can see that we could get down that road of people making that an issue if it became a matter of dollars and cents.
The other perspective I might throw into this is that if you follow the requirements of the beach dune rules in terms of sargassum, you're not going to have a requirement for a core permit.
Picking it up doesn't require the core permit unless you got all the way out into the water, and then you're
No.
But dropping the sand is a gray area there. If you've shaken the stuff off and the sand, hasn't gone more than a few feet, that's not a big deal.
Well, let Lloyd respond to that.
Right. Well, no, we're talking this de minimis rule situation because that's been knocked around for more
John,
years.
just be sure if I understand, if you that's considered to be dredging.
That's dredging, see, right. Above the mean high tide line, we're out of Section 10 jurisdiction. Now we're just dealing with 404, and it's the deposition that becomes important. But even then, if the deposition is very small and it's incidental to the movement of the seaweed, that's probably not going to be your problem. Your bigger problem is if you carry this stuff off somewhere and you did separate the sand, you couldn't bring it back and put it on the beach without that permit from the Corps.
Below the annual high tide line,
Yeah.
above the annual high tide line.
Yeah,
So there's
it's
an
the
area there
jurisdictional
between
areas
lines.
are very confusing because there's two jurisdictions just with the Corps alone, and then there's the private landowners.
I could throw in a third, but I won't.
You've said too much.
Well, that one is the one that somebody else makes all the rules. We propose, he disposes.
So right now, we can't pick it up and tote it over there and compost it.
If you do it in a way that it's considered to be sand-free or minimal sand, yes.
But
As far as the regulatory permitting goes.
But wouldn't we have to bring the compost back and put it back on the beach?
It all depends on the local landowner and whether they get,
Oh, I thought that was currently everything that's on the beach.
sand-wise.
Oh, just sand,
Yes.
but the organic can go
We
away?
would prefer it stay in the system. That was the idea, is to keep that organic matter in the system.
Uh-huh.
But our rules don't specifically say organic matter. We'd rather have the trash picked out and hand picked out and all of the organic matter remain on the beach because it's part of the system.
Well, yeah. But, so like, we've got 2 feet of sargassum, and we get real chintzy and take 1.5 feet off and carry that off and leave the other. We pretend we didn't get any sand in there. That's okay as long as
We're not saying it's okay. We just have to think about all of it. I just can't say, yes, it's okay, let's go for
Well,
it. But
I don't know how to do that anyway. So.
absolutely, we can start, looking at considering and maybe applying for a CMP grant to study it or something like that to really look at it. We'd have to look at it. I can't say, yes, that's okay. It's just not our place to say that. There's still a lot of other factors and things that we have to think through before we did that. But we certainly can look at it and start going down that direction for sure.
I suspect that if things make sense and don't do damage, and in addition make money, they can probably be permitted. And if taking some of the seaweed during the heavy deposition periods for the purpose of making money from the property of private landowners, they would probably be perfectly happy with it as long as they get some of the money, which makes perfect sense. So, and if the stuff has to be taken off site, say over near Port Aransas's garbage transfer section, to be separate, have the sand separated from it, or maybe initial composting or something like that, and then after that's done, the sand goes back on the beach. I suspect that can probably be permitted too. Because, right now, and recently, a whole lot of things have been done that weren't permitted, and lots of things that are questionable do get permitted. So if it really makes sense and doesn't do damage, there's probably a way. For instance, it's no big deal to dump sand on a beach. It's done all the time on beach nourishment, so that can certainly be gotten through.
Actually, for Sargassum 09, it'd be great if the Texas General Land Office could come back with a more precise opinion of what can be done or what cannot be done.
It probably would take more time to study something to have a definitive answer by then, and within a year, but I definitely think our team could go back and apply for some CMP grants, or if there's anybody that knows a graduate student that would like some projects that we could co-sponsor a CMP grant with, we definitely might look at that. It's an option out there, but I don't think a year is maybe long enough, so.
This discussion of who gets money from the sargassum removed from the beach almost conjures up this analogy of mineral rights. Somebody produces oil or gas from below your property, and we're going to establish, sargassum income rights.
Technically, they are mineral rights.
Yes, they are. So, anyways, just a thought.
Maybe we can kind of narrow the field a little bit and leave the private matters. And it's been suggested that only those areas that have the major public use are really the ones that need this primary grooming that goes on daily. And maybe we should concentrate on what to do with areas like Padre Bayi, to say it right, or up at Port Aransas, where we're dealing with a very public, intensively used area. Can we concentrate on what's to be done with the volume that comes just from those beaches that are essentially public? I think that's where our problems are. The private landowners are probably better off not having anything grouped.
Well, I think, I mean, what are you considering private? I mean, there's, the premier subdivisions up in Port Aransas and Newport that's coming online, they want groomed beaches.
Yes, but who's paying for it?
Well, right now the city is, but we're starting to shift towards a policy where, the city would like to defer that maintenance to the private landowner. So, since we're trying to get away from, like the trucking of seaweed south 5 miles to vacant property. Now we're kind of like taking the stance, well, hey, Newport, that's your seaweed, you deal with it.
Yeah.
And if you guys want a clean beach, then you guys need to look into possibly core permitting for your portion of the beach, or dune permitting with the general land office for rear stacking and back stacking. I mean, we'd love to pull our maintenance back to where
it's a liability for you, both in the cost of doing the maintenance, but also if the landowner objects.
Dave, would that be similar like Bo Rollins has got that business?
Right, exactly, like Bo Rollins up in West Galveston, the city does not do Sargassum maintenance on all those private subdivisions. They contract that out themselves.
That contractor has to go, or that entity has to get the
Correct.
permit and the beach permit.
Right.
That contractor has to operate under the.
Correct.
Well, that's why I'm saying it's simpler just to narrow the field to what the public can do on the public beach.
There's another advantage to that as well, because right now, something I just realized this morning, which has probably caused some of the problems, is that the cities and the counties are in the position of permitting themselves. In other words, nobody's really keeping an eye on them, but they're going to keep a lot tighter rein. Their boards will keep a lot tighter rein on private landowners and private people doing this than they do on themselves. Likely.
And the local governments are responsible for maintaining the beaches within their jurisdiction, but that doesn't mean that they can't pass that responsibility on, but they may have to do a plan amendment that addresses specifics that they want to see when cleaning their beach in their area. So therefore, you'd have guidelines within the beachfront construction dune protection permits that would guide that type of thing that's specific to every local government. Like I said, we don't want to put like a rubber stamp totally, for everyone to follow. We want everyone to adapt something that works for them. There are minimal standards that we want, but that would definitely be something that they could look at locally, for sure.
Can we get some of that put in the symposium write-up?
Sure.
I always worry about, having the private people do something that, the government's supposed to be overseeing or whatever, like with the, have the private landowners take away their own sargassum. I have visions of them, well, what was the old guy said, napalm, something really that would mess up the beach and the dunes and take sand away and all kinds of things before they got caught and stopped.
That's one.
Possibly Port Aransas could just charge them to do it.
I would like to see the biota considered in the development of BMPs and specific to different biota and seasonally and all that. I think that needs to be integrated. Just, we're talking about moving sand and sargassum and all that, but the impacts on the biota, I think it would be good to have some best management practices for that.
Well, what we could do, if y'all want to, we could go down the road of having all the local governments, local entities come together, and we formulate some type of task force and develop some best management practices for beach maintenance, taking into consider everybody, Fish and Wildlife, Parks and Wildlife, us,
That's what it would
everyone.
take.
And
A team.
that's a really, I mean, I've done that with farmers with irrigation systems, and they come out with some really fabulous ideas and insight to things that we don't think about on the regulatory side, but they actually sometimes come up with better ideas than ourselves. So that is absolutely something we could think about doing and getting together. And I know we've discussed that amongst ourselves, coming up with best management practices, whole encompassing for the beach dune system. But this could be a good starting point or a test pilot on that. And if we came up with some kind of really good document, then I think it would definitely be workable.
Well, maybe that would be something that could move forward in '09.
Along that line, something that needs to be looked at, which is rarely looked at, and it's partly because nearly everybody, with a few exceptions in power, locally, state-wise, has never experienced a bad hurricane, because the last bad one we had was nearly 40 years ago. And that is, we've got to be very careful about making rules. An example would be putting that line between the natural dune and the maintenance dune, and assuming that that's where the natural dune would be if we hadn't been driving on the beach and doing the maintenance and stacking stuff, when in fact the natural dune would probably be much further out. But after the dunes are eroded during a storm, how are the rules going to adjust to that to make sure that the dunes are allowed, either man-made or with help, to build back seaward again when it's a natural process that takes decades, but they're vitally important to the protection of the island and the real estate behind them, which is getting more valuable all the time. So that's something that needs to be done very carefully, so that the same rules may not necessarily be wanted to be applied after a major erosion of the dunes.
We actually have that. We recently did a rule whenever this past summer when we had, was it called? Umberto, yeah. Umberto came in on the northern coast. And we do issue emergency rules that are good for a certain amount of time for dune restoration projects and for certain repairs to homes after a major storm event. And we do have that authority to write emergency rules for that type of thing, and we've done it at least once since I've been there, and they've done it several times before.
The natural process takes decades.
Yes, which is why we have the dune restoration built into that. But we do have rules built into that for dune restoration projects during that time, so people just don't go out and do geotextile tubes or some other kind of thing. We have very specific things that we would ask for whenever someone's doing that.
I think part of what I hear Richard saying is that the way the statute is written for the line of vegetation does not actually currently encompass recovery periods for storms. And the VEG has been studying a lot of vegetation changes as a result of storms for many years. And you can get a feel for what the historical process of how long it takes to where it originally was. And as development continues, development obscures that process. And so probably there does need to be a need to look at what responsive mechanisms need to be addressed for the line of vegetation.
Well, I think it certainly goes without saying that we would probably all appreciate more research. So if anybody has ideas of places to come up with research dollars or students, and I think Tim had perhaps some ideas.
Yeah, it'd be good to just do some of these beach maintenance practices in an applied but replicated fashion, and do a lot of monitoring along with it, and so we can kind of continue to do this in an adaptive fashion.
On our webpage is the information for applying for grants. June 25th is the deadline for pre-proposal for the next cycle of coastal management program grants. And we're getting a lot more money when we can get past the bureaucratic hurdles of a category called Coastal Impact Assistance Program. It'll be a larger category of funds. And NOAA's talking a lot about a new grant program for climate change issues as well. So the money's out there. Pay attention to our webpage and link your applications.
and we have some federal sources that we could marry up with the state funds
That would be great.
as well. And, maybe we could come up with some sort of a design, project design. And, of course, we'd be most keenly interested in looking at beach maintenance practices that would be beneficial to piping floaters and sea turtles. Sure. So if we could show benefit for those creatures in this project, I think we've got a pretty good chance of coming up with some funds.
I know that that's high on the CMP, this last go around for our coastal management program. That's one of the things that's up there as far as the priorities of the CDC, that particular thing. So I'm sure that if we got together, we could maybe leverage against each other to get some funds. I think it's up to $500,000. So they're going for bigger projects now that create a larger impact with the idea they didn't want to manage a whole bunch of teeny tiny ones, so they're trying to target bigger things. And the same thing with CF. They're trying to get big, encompassing projects, and that's in the millions of dollars, of course, So.
One thing I'd like to say is that, I think everybody wants to have the best available information to make decisions on, but the way our regulations are written is that we have to use the information we have now. And in developing this regional general permit, buddy, we'd like to have, all the answers, but we have to make a decision. The applicant has a right in the regulations to demand that we make a decision on an application, and so we have to move on, okay? That doesn't mean that we can't be meeting or building task groups and come up and amend a certain permit once it is issued in the future, but we just let everybody know that, we're going to have to make decisions on these permits that we have now sooner than later.
Is there any way that the Corps and the GLO can fast track very limited permits for some experimental stuff? That, for instance, some of the people that are interested in compacting or using their various machines could
right now, there are nationwide permits that allow you to put so much material in a jurisdictional area if it meets certain conditions. So, there could be that if it's a limited area for scientific study, it might meet one of those general nationwide permits.
Well, maybe not even a scientific study, but a study by the people, for instance, that might want to find an economic use for the seaweed, need to be able to give it a try at a limited level to see if it's going to work without having to spend years and getting permission to do it.
Our permitting process is a lot quicker than before. We have to do it within 10 days, 10 working days. So once we get a permit, we have to have our comments, and it has to be reviewed by the required staff and out the door. Unless it's large scale.
It's 30 days. It's just still fast.
It's still a lot quicker.
I have a kind of a wild, unscientific observation, something I'd like to see for 2009, but it's probably more likely 2010, something like that. I saw that there's a niche industry out there, primarily because there isn't any one solution yet to the multitude of problems that we have involving sargassum, from what it's like the first day and the second day and the third day, and what happens if it rains in between, and what happens when it's 3 feet deep as opposed to one sprig every 100 yards. It struck me in the middle of one of the presentations that there was a device being used there that looked kind of vaguely familiar, and it was because several years ago, I don't know how many people here have watched the program Junkyard Wars. Mm-hmm. Junkyard Wars, there we go. Where a couple of teams took junk and in 24 hours built machinery that very vaguely resembled what was on the screen, to go out and clean up trash in an enclosed environment. It wasn't a beach at all. But the point I'm trying to get to, it would be really nice for 2009, 2010 to have some sponsors, the city, perhaps even the niche industry that we were being entertained by, for a competition to be placed out there for high school or college students to design little things like this. You've seen similar stuff done all the time. People try to design the darndest things, human-powered vehicles and so forth, and they give a prize for them. I would like to see somebody get an organization together, and each year when we have a meeting like this, get those kids out there and show them, this is This is how practical developments come about. It's by improvisation. It's by nickel and dime because you can't afford, $5 million in R&D. I would love to see somebody get that going for the next couple of years because we have enough brain drain. We've got enough kids here that would probably leave and design this sort of thing. Why not keep them here and keep them in college?
Johnny, I like your idea there. Several people have come and spoken with me after my little impromptu mention about the importance of public relations, and I'm seeing that as maybe something that could be encompassed with the outreach to the general public, because it's not scientific, and it could have scientific outcomes, but it would be something that would appeal to the general public and raise awareness at the same time about what's going on out here.
Now, we're talking about something that might pick up a cubic yard in a couple of hours because it was built in somebody's garage. And it isn't intended to go much further than that unless somebody picks up on it and says, that's got an innovation. That's capable of doing something we haven't thought of doing.
Tammy, Corpus Christi is about to get a mechanical engineering program started. That'd be a perfect term project.
Well, we need it quicker than that.
Yeah.
I mean, we need it by next year or the next year and a half.
Well, when they get it going, I mean, what a better location with all the marine science.
No, we've got one of those classic cases where a necessity is the mother of our invention.
One idea that might facilitate all of this, of course, is that the local governments currently don't calculate volume. And so if we had some quantitative measure, even if it was nothing more than bucket loads of sargassum picked up, if we got a little closer to some quantitative measure.
Well, Tony had a quantitative measure, if you'll recall.
No, I don't remember that.
Oh, well, yeah.
I'm sure your contractors
Right.
definitely know the exact measurements for every per much fuel they
Well,
use.
a number of people asked questions when there were presentations, and most local governments are not collecting that kind of data. So that would be
Can I make one comment here? Just back to the CF, because I think everybody having this kind of a group together is really important to trying to get some of that competitive CF funds allocated. And I don't know if Port Aransas or City of Corpus or even GLO's authority they have over the state amount of CF that has anything targeted towards the sargassum. But if it doesn't, it's when you get this kind of a group together that involves cities and counties and conservation groups and what all, and whomever the sponsor is of that, that's going to get the highest points for getting competitive CF funds allocated to a project like this. I suspect that most counties and cities along the entire Texas coast are probably doing their own CF applications for getting some of the competitive funds, but you're talking about millions and millions of dollars. And of course, a symposium like this is a great thing to have year after year, but I hate seeing this many people get together on a common front and not make a decision at this meeting today to move towards some kind of a initiative, because the CF funding, it's very complex. It's 4 years. The next 2008, 9, and 10, they're going to be asking for projects probably in July, I suspect, July, August. The GLO, of course, is helping administer this. The money's coming from MMS, but and of course y'all make your own decisions internally. Y'all get your own pot of money or something, but you're very involved in how other entities, be it I don't know if the coalition or who, or some group that grows out of this, but there's an excellent opportunity coming up this summer for putting together an application that would go into MMS, administered by the GLO, to target some of those funds somehow. It has to be regional, And so anyhow, I wanted to mention that because y'all were talking about CF. It's the biggest pot of money for doing something worthwhile for the all the Sargassum issues that everybody's talking about.
On that line, we need to absolutely, obviously from everybody's input, there is an interest in keeping this, whatever this evolves into, and we're talking amongst ourselves here, Team Sargassum has, about applying for a Sargassum.org being a nonprofit group, 503 or whatever it is. And I don't know what all that involves. I don't know the time frame. I don't know if that's too late to be going for CMP or CF this year. But we're looking about going that way. And I know you said we needed to come up with let's do something today, and marching orders for today. Hopefully we can do that. And under what umbrella? That's the other one. Is it just this? I'm sure the Beach Access Coalition would be happy to participate, but I think it might move out of their realm and become its own entity. And I don't mind being part of that and enlist all the support and help from everybody, broad spectrum across the state. But one thing we're going to do is start, and I was talking to James Davis, the guys running our website, is we're going to set up a forum on there. So we can actually have a forum that everybody can sign up, and it's going to be made available, at least offered to everybody that's on, even the people that didn't show up, but on the 500-something people I did send emails to, and 100-something responded and showed up, which is amazing. But that's the seed of it. But not to take away, I think you're absolutely right. Something needs to be a direction. What are we going to do next? What are we going to do next? And my second thing is, are we using these microphones? Because I like to pick them up.
Just one other comment. I'll shut up.
And I'm listening on very side.
Very likely there's some, maybe lobbying is the wrong word, but this group, whether it's a 501c3 or not, it's either lobbying with the GLO and how they're going to spend their pot of money they get, and it's probably also getting with the estuary program, because the estuary program has their priorities and all that, but they are the entity that I know they do have CF projects that they've gone in on. So it's probably a matter of getting with them as well. We'll see if they would sponsor the application for funding to do a series of things that this group might help, partner with them coming up with.
I had just one little comment, and we've got a legislative session coming up, and I think we all need to be cognizant that something goofy could come out of that. Depending on how much attention gets drawn, and just to be aware that maybe we should be alert to that.
So lobbying with our local legislators is another opportunity. Not lobbying, talking.
Well, I mean, sure, people from Dallas.
That's all lobbying.
It's somebody from Dallas that comes up with some idea or something. That's what I'm.
Our challenge, too, with our program is we have to go and ask for funds every 2 years to sponsor our program. So the money's not always there. So every year, Commissioner Patterson's over there with his cup in one hand, Schenken, and his sign, we'll protect the beach for food and money, So he literally does do that. He walks around. And so just to be aware that our existence and our ability to help y'all and drive this engine is contingent on whether or not we get funding every 2 years from the ledge.
And you all don't just think about the beach either.
No, we think about a lot of other things too. But our goal is, to work within that beach deed system and the local governments and help them manage their plans. But yes, we have a lot of other things that go on in there. Of course, the KEPA program is one that does the erosion response and prevention, and which gives out a lot of projects to do beach nourishment and dune restoration projects. And they work to get federal funds from FEMA whenever we have hurricanes to replenish the beaches. And of course, there's NERDA, and then CMP. The CMP kind of they get some of their funding from the federal government. the rest of us that are on the chopping block every 2 years.
Well, and also you have to pay attention to the panhandle and
Yes, because
Fort
it
Stockton or
comes out
something.
of the general revenue, so I'm trying to make all of them aware of how critical and important our coastal habitats are, coastal regions are to the rest of the state, not just people that live here.
Being from the peanut gallery, is anybody proposing a government-private type of relationship? Because it would seem to me that restoring the dunes and dealing with beach edge has a direct effect on real estate directly behind it. Ergo, the insurance companies that have to pay for things, not just talking about FEMA, but the private insurers, would they have an interest in protecting their assets during a major event?
The unfortunate thing about Texas is that our windstorm insurance and our hurricane insurance is subsidized by the state. So there's not a lot of private insurance. We've actually, most all of the insurance is subsidized through the state itself. So it's kind of hard to have cheap insurance to really, that's state drives. It's kind of hard to just leverage that.
The major insurers refuse to pay any attention to it at all.
They don't even touch the coast, basically, as far as that type of insurance.
They don't care if your house burns down.
But you might be able to get private landowners involved, all the new private landowners along the beach. They might be willing to chip in on some kind of a CF, government, local conservation group sponsored, landowner, industry, co-funded initiative that was going to try to target some kind of a project that had regional benefit.
It'll be more on the local level. It'll be more on the local level, the local governments, the local entities that you have to partner up with, I would think.
The only reason I brought it up is I've had clients that have beachfront property, and they've had us come out and look at their dunes and make recommendations on how to reestablish those because, they have $300,000 carpets in their beach house. And they like them. So.
The CF program is a huge and is the largest pot of money out there to do environmental, natural resource related things. And the competitive amount of that money that's out there that has not come into this area of the coast is major. A lot of it went, no offense, but a lot of it went up there to the northern coastline, mainly because of hurricane related things. And then a lot of it also went down south. But MMS, who's in charge of this, changed the whole game plan on how they're ranking projects. And they don't want you to spend projects anymore on like a park or recreation. They want the money to be spent on restoration and natural resources and all that. So a lot of counties all down the coast are having to change a lot of the project, visions they've come up with.
Right, because didn't Nueces County have they had kind of fairgrounds and?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
our county.
I submitted one in by
Well, that
Grande
was
and
one.
got beat out
That
by
was just
both grants.
Nueces County, each commissioner had their own project. I helped them put it all together.
Right, but
one
still.
Commissioner had fairgrounds, stormwater VMPs. The other one wanted to improve the piers here on the beach.
Right.
Other ones had projects that were more environmentally related. But everybody's now got to regroup and figure this out differently, and it has to now be more resource oriented. And so, and again, the northern counties, they got, 90% of all the competitive CF money went north and south. And this, of all the projects I've heard of with CF in this area, this one here has the greatest potential for having regional type of benefit, especially when you roll in the fact that the Corps got the RGP, the individual permit process going, they're going to come up with VMPs. There's timing on that might be related to, submitting. There's going to be an application opportunity due in, I think, July, August, what you said. and that's for the 2008 monies, and there's 2009 and 2010. And they also like project visions that have multiple years, they're involved in several years of applications, so.
So would trying to figure out what to do with our sargassum once it's picked up, that would be considered a resource?
Yeah.
So like if we
Natural resource.
tried to figure out how to do all this composting and selling fertilizer and all of that?
I mean, you have to envision the project that has the greatest opportunity for funding. And a lot of times, you know, wanting to buy equipment is not going to get you the point. But many of the other things that we're talking about here could involve more research dollars, it could involve mapping, it could involve demonstration projects that are in each geographic zone, all throughout this mid-Texas, South Texas coast. We want to come up with a really eco-friendly green habitat. A lot of the green tea stuff we're talking about, you know, there's projects that have to have a very direct restoration benefit on the coastal resource that'll get the highest point. And if they come from a consortium group like this, multiple conservation groups, entities, especially if you get a GLO behind you, maybe the estuary program. But I think most cities and counties are probably individually pursuing their own individual competitors in the CAP, but they might be willing to pool together on one. You know, a lot of times they don't want to play the whole hand. Just, you know, they have their own particular projects in their own city, but this is maybe a little bit different.
I saw an opportunity that I wish hadn't been foregone, and I'll bring it up only once and move on. But when the Tortuga Dunes thing occurred, I was remarkably disturbed that the sand wasn't put in areas where we really needed dunes. And now we have another source of material. It does have some sand in it, but it really does more gathering of its own. If it's put in the right places. We saw a presentation about how it's been applied in several places along the coast, whether you call it a bale or you call it the core of a dune or whatever the heck. I would like to see something done here locally, in and around the Washoe Pass areas from Packery Channel north, behind that 20-foot in front of the vegetation line, so that it's not going to be stepping on toes. Now, some of the property we're talking about is private, but most of it belongs to the county or the GLO. I would like to see somebody, first of all, designate which areas actually need the construction of dunes. And if they can be decided, if they can be determined, and they're not going to be involving taking out piping plover habitat primarily, because that's one of the concentration points. If you can find those areas, designate them up front, not just for the use of private landowners who have problems with where their dunes are and want them elsewhere, but primarily replace this material that is being gathered up now for beach maintenance purposes with the idea that it shall become a dune over time. And because we can build it in small increments, because we can control what kind of vegetation is begun there, it will be a real dune eventually, and not just one that has a veneer of vegetation and only looks like one. It will be the real deal. What do you think of that, Richard?
Well, I like that idea in general, especially in weak areas in the Fore Dune Ridge. And like I said, we need to try to get private landowners to be willing to accept this. In fact, be thrilled to get it. But I disagree with you on those Newport Pass, Corpus Christi Pass washover areas, because those let hurricane floodwaters out of the bay.
Okay, well, this is why I threw that caveat in there, and I don't want to concentrate on that area. It was just the first place I thought of, because it was near that place I won't mention again.
But the rest of the island, in both directions, there are no historical washover channels because they healed up a long time ago. And beefing up the dune ridges there, especially where the ongoing beach erosion, is a good idea. But just like we needed the that seemingly useless long section of bridge in the causeway, we didn't need it for circulation in Laguna Madre because it doesn't do anything. We did need it to let hurricane floodwaters out of Laguna Madre. And so we want to get the hurricane floodwaters out as much as possible. And these are called hurricane washover channels. Of course, no one ever sees that happen because they're either dead or gone out inland, but they're actually mainly opened up by the floodwaters coming leaving. And we need to allow them to continue to do that. But, yeah, beneficial use to build up the dunes is something
I'll defer to that. Yeah, my analogy was based on something else, but yeah, the idea, as I saw presented here, was that there were small gaps, and they could be targeted, and I don't see why that couldn't be true of potentially bigger gaps. And we could use a combination of sands from private development and sargassum from the public beach anytime that there is an identified gap that needs to be filled. And the suggestion I have is that we start identifying where those gaps are now. We can do that immediately.
Give you some kind of insight on that.
We can do that immediately. Well, the LIDAR surveys and so forth would tell us where those need to be.
And another thing that is coming out Friday, of course, which is our erosion response plan, which all the local governments are going to have to adopt and put in their beach maintenance, their local beach plans.
Be proactive with this.
We have taken part of that. Says that the local governments have to assess any fording ridges, places that they feel are weak, also the height of their dunes, whether or not it will protect them against a 100-year storm surge. So this comes out on Friday, so if y'all want to take a look at it and go through it, read it, make comments, and see if there's anything that y'all need that we feel like we should add. But each local government's going to tailor their own, so these are just minimal standards.
How are we going to access it?
It's on the Texas Register, the SOS website.
Oh, how do we access it?
It's actually great. Yeah, you can do it online.
Secretary of State site online.
It's
one way. There's other ways too.
We should put a link probably on our beach.
We should.
Okay.
How high is a 100-year hurricane?
A 100-year storm surge? It actually varies as you go along the coast, and in most places it goes between 10 to 15 feet.
That all?
Yeah.
Really?
It's just the minimal. The idea is not to protect you from a huge catastrophic storm. There's nothing that's going to do that. The idea is to protect the local communities from the ongoing
most probable.
Right, the most probable things that we would encounter.
They're always talking about 100-year floods and, the entire state of Nebraska is underwater or something like that.
Well, even Hurricane Carla was only 12 feet on the open Gulf Beach. However, that put 12 feet of water into Matagorda Bay, Lavaca Bay, which then the hurricane winds blew down on Port O'Connor to a depth of 22 feet. So the really high surges are in the bays, not the open Gulf. A 15-foot surge on the open Gulf is a gigantic storm at this end of the island. You could get a bigger one further up the coast where it's shallower, further offshore.
And some of the rain that Carla added to that wound up with drift lines 35 feet above sea level.
I want to make an observation and go back to what other people were saying about why our beaches are getting narrow. Beaches, their shape is a result of natural forces over many years, and it's only since we've been putting buildings on islands that we've drawn a negative attitude about hurricanes. But actually, hurricanes are one of the forces that allow long, wide beaches to be formed by reshaping the sand. So there are positive aspects to storms, but if you have a broad set of buildings, you're not going to have that sand to redistribute like you will in an area that has a lot more sand that's more naturally oriented, or the buildings are set further back.
People don't realize that the beaches were dynamic a long time before they were people.
Yeah.
It occurs to me that
there are several common interests that are expressed thematically throughout. Dune protection and enhancement, beach preservation and renourishment, environmental and ecosystem protection. And then, in addition, I perceive a common interest in the idea of sargassum as a resource. And like the old proverb, the solution to every problem is found within the problem.
I like lemons and lemonade.
Lemons and lemonade. There you go. One of the things that's occurred to me, and I guess it's probably because I have such a deep and abiding empathy, I guess, for the shrimping industry, having worked with Sea Grant on that, is what has happened and the resource that's disappeared. We've got shrimp boats sitting in harbors rusting away. And the other thing that has occurred to me is that we're really trying to deal with sargassum on land. And I'm wondering if anyone has given any thought to the idea of a sargassum intercept program where the sargassum is actually picked up at sea near shore before it becomes problematic on the land, at least in some quantity, with a percentage left for that natural effort, but the excess collected on those periodic occasions when it comes in offshore. Then perhaps it can be collected more easily and then reapplied in the appropriate location. I don't know if any thought has been given to something like that.
I believe there have been some harvesting vessels in some areas, but there's problems with the laws in doing that. And just on the top of it, I was thinking about it in an instant. Somebody probably could have a business and make money that way, but I doubt if you could possibly have enough ships out there during the sargassum season to significantly affect the amount that comes in when it's a really heavy load of it coming in, because those ships would be sitting around doing it the rest of the year doing nothing.
CH, can you bring that in front of the camera for a moment?
I think there's
vessels of limit. Yeah, there's an indication of the scope of the problem. Any of that material there in the Gulf of Mexico could wash up at any time, and we're talking cubic miles of it.
Mm-hmm. Isn't there current legislation though prohibiting that?
I thought I saw a statistic that there was a limit on how much could be picked up to 5,000 pounds per vessel per year.
Yeah.
And then also there's only one vessel doing it. Somebody said that the other
and then there's also this critical habitat issues because they are considered critical habitat.
Essential fish habitat.
I'm a geologist.
Okay, that's good.
5,000 pounds is nothing.
Yeah, no. Right. I mean, compared to what's out there.
Oh, that washes up on an acre of beach easily.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
I would only be thinking within the context of those beaches that folks really want to limit it. The rest of the beaches, which are vast, you wouldn't be concerned about, and you would only pick it up near shore. In other words, the part of the sargassum that's not considered a habitat-ready environment once it begins to spread out.
It is up until it gets on the land, essential fish habitat. NIMS would have to address that question because those fish are using it until they're out of the water. So that's definitely a question that they would be maybe able to weigh in better on.
Oh, we got told you fish underneath it and you get great big fish.
Yeah.
Because they're all onshore and the longshore current too. Pretty good distance, that's why it packs up so wide deep in the jetties. So. Even if it's legal, I don't think it'd be too much of it.
We're talking about the filter. I mean, this is the filter that cleans the ocean. And you're looking at what's in the water, plus the dead zone, plus the stuff we're pumping in there. And so, while I can completely understand where you're coming from the environmental side, you're talking about taking the filter that cleans the water out.
Well, no, I think what he's saying is catch it while it's
Only
inevitable that it's going to be on
it is
TV.
inevitable. But it's still performing, as long as it's still in the water, it's still performing its function of being a great detoxifier to what extent it can.
Have we tried moving it back into the dead zone?
The plastic dead zone or the...
the cool idea, the plastic dead zone, yeah.
I've seen that
I
one.
like that. I'm worried about, we need a bacterium for that, but no, the Mississippi River dead zone. take the sargassum, move it over there, and let it filter?
Use it for fertilizer for the riparian corridor that needs to filter the fertilizer.
So we're gonna give the bill to for that.
Well, you're talking about, Carolyn, some people want to make money off
Hotel
of it
tax.
and turn it into fertilizer, and now you want to take it for public use and spread it out in another area, and that would put us in competition.
Oh, well, we'd lose then.
There are disparate interests,
Yes.
many,
Yeah.
from a lot of different angles.
In fact, one thing that I thought of earlier, but that working downtown Corpus Christi, I see that people sometimes dump their trash out on the sidewalk because the trash containers are locked, because everybody doesn't have to pay for trash. Apparently, it's not, businesses don't have to do that. So I will see trash left out on the sidewalks. And it occurs to me, this is because you can't get in the way of private industry who collect these trash and have these contracts. And looking in the future of this problem that's just starting out, can we avoid that situation in the future? And it's hard to see what's going to happen in the future when you get the private-public interface. But I wish there was a way to go back in there and somehow maybe not privatize all of these waste collection systems so that everyone would have to pay for it. So it wouldn't be beneficial financially to put your trash out on the sidewalk.
Generally, when there's money to be made at something and enterprising private people and business can get into it, it's good for everybody. They make money, they pay taxes, the problem gets dealt with. That's an ideal thing. It's way better to have private people doing it and making a profit than having it being done with tax money, whether it be state, local, federal, or whatever. That's coming out of the citizens' pockets, and if people can make money, put money in their pockets, and then they're paying taxes, which are going in to help fund everything else, that's a superb benefit.
It could be I'm looking at accountability, that I need to hold my government more accountable.
For the non-fertilizer that you would process in about, let's say, a year's time,
Okay.
about what percentage of weed would you actually be able to take off the beach to process that? I mean, are we talking like you're taking 90% or you only need like 10% of it?
Well, you bring up a great point, because someone has said, hey, is seaweed as a compost or fertilizer better than something else? And I went, wait a minute. I'm not saying get in competition with the chicken guys or the turkey guys or the horse manure guys or the green waste guys or the MSW guys. I'm saying this is a fantastic percentage that you should be selling to them in order to enhance their product. So instead of just trying to say, hey, we're only going to use it in our area, make enough for your area, and the excess run into those other potential markets.
I mean, we get excessive amounts. Would you be able to
I
process
grew up in the
it?
Texas coast. I have my boat in Hawaii.
Yeah,
so
I know.
got it.
So, I mean, we're not talking about, about that as a business, as a profit. We're not necessarily talking about it to be a solution to clean our beaches.
Well, we want to leave enough stuff here for the natural area. We want to take care of your area as a primary focus because it belongs here.
Right.
Then whatever's excess of that goes off. But one of the interesting things about when we talk about making it into a liquid is a tea. Let me back up. If you make a yard of compost, which you say about 75% of your original starting materials degrade during the process to begin with. So you have this yard that's left over. That yard can then be made into a whole lot more liquid than it is as a solid. So depending on the quality of the seaweed and the type of organisms that can be extracted from it on a temperature, rainfall, sunlight basis, then we can say, hey, this is what's left over. Am I answering?
Well, part of the deal could be that they could also be providing the local entity, municipalities, et cetera, with some of that tea, which could then easily be sprayed up in our dunes to help vegetate our dunes, because I don't think that there's any other source of fertilizer for our dunes other than the sargassum and dead fish that come in and decompose. I mean, what else could there be? Yes,
but
that's the
then
real-
becomes something that can be worked out as a
But
business
and if
deal
this stuff
if
is
they want to
if this
take it
stuff
off
is
our beach.
valuable, this is a big country, this is a big world. If it works for somebody and their market is filled up, someone else will come in and put it in another market. So this is, I mean, even if you had tank cars full of it, it can be moved. So no, she can't clean the whole beach.
Right.
But if it works for her, somebody else is going to want to get in and on somewhere else. It could put money in private people's pockets, which goes into the tax stream. It can put money into the local municipalities, the local landowners, if it's coming off of their property. And some of it can go back into fertilizing the dunes more efficiently, perhaps, than even happens naturally.
Yeah, and I think that's a great idea. I'm just thinking we still, at some point, will probably need some method on the beach, whatever you leave there, we still, whether we're still going to push that up and front stack or back stack, it's going, I mean, we'll have a lot less, which will be great because we're using the excess for some type of profit, but we're still going to need some machine or some method or some protocol for us to clean up the rest of it because we don't want to remove it all.
And remember, we're talking about a quality issue because we were talking about your area. You have 1 day old, 3 day old, 5 day old seaweed, or it contains different toxins depending on the time of year or the temperature. So we can't say that the amount that fits in this little box will make the same amount of product every time because it does not. It changes with time and temperature as well as input. But since you've already got engineers that have made really unique rules about making 20 and 40-foot dunes, where the new material cannot create a root system that gives you the micro, macro aggregates in order to hold the dune in place. This would allow us to go back in and reinstitute the biology necessary to drive those root systems down to give you a standing solid dune.
Well, it seems to me that there must be a harvesting philosophy that is effective enough to capture the product like any crop at its optimum timing, so that you can indeed reprocess.
We want to fill it up with as much toxins in the water so that when we come out, we get as much. That's food source for the breakdown guys, and then after they've done their job, that they become the food source for the good guys. And when we get to the good guys, that's when we put it back.
It's not just an issue of the toxins too. We've got the problem now that we're facing all over the place with carbon sequestration, whatever you want to call it. We're trying to take a material and put it back into a plant so the carbon stays here and not in our atmosphere. Because we're looking at
Sargassum is picking up a lot.
Sargassum is doing a heck of a lot of it. Yeah, and when it washes up on the beach, eventually it blows inland. It fertilizes the vegetation that's on this island, and maybe the only fertilizer it gets. And if we interrupt that cycle, then we put more CO2 in the atmosphere, and it gets warmer, which may be why we're getting more sargassum, and the problem gets worse.
If we're getting more.
If we're getting more sargassum, yeah, this is all on human time scale. We don't know what the heck we're looking at. But yes, if we could gather this stuff up and keep it out there on the island in the form of green vegetation, we'd be much better off than trying to haul it off somewhere else and get a buck for it in the long run, because we don't use as much energy that way anyhow.
Well, I suspect we're getting a lot more of it than the vegetation needs.
I suspect that's the case, but we got to do something with it. If we just let it sit there and rot, then it becomes methane and CO2, and we got bigger problems than we would have had if we, try to make a buck off of it.
I'm curious about composting.
Yes.
Is there ever a issue of spontaneous combustion from that?
It's a methane issue, and there are design ways to combat that so that there's never a problem. I mean, I've had static piles at places all over the country that
Like
never
mulching.
get turned, that have never blown up, that are thermophilic, they have normal heat up, normal cool down. They're fantastic products.
Really?
There's also a whole group of the U.S. Composting Council who will tell you every single day of the week that what we've done over and over again is not even possible with their math. So it depends on who you're talking to, what the inputs are internally, and how well the pile is aerated, and that is completely by design.
I heard people putting black plastic over it and getting it to blow up.
You would already have issues if it were a problem, but I was just curious if there were a problem with spontaneous
I've
combustion.
seen bale hay catch fire.
It will happen if you have the correct, if you have too many anaerobic organisms breaking things down, they make methane. That methane in China is then used to heat apartment complexes. Here we just allow it to blow off into the atmosphere. However, if you have enough air, the O, going into that
There you go.
enclosed area, then you are not going to have the methane. You're not going to have the CH4 problem because you have an O being added into that equation.
Yeah, you'll have more.
Yeah. There's, you know, you can
Gotta
get
do
more
something with it.
Yeah, you can get more organic organisms in there to break it down faster at a not dangerous rate.
Thanks, I was just curious.
It'd be
Well,
nice if we
answer
could
it,
just
the full conundrum.
turn it directly into mushrooms, and then we could eat it.
You know, on that same point though, what about the piles? Like, Nueces County is going to start backstacking back here between beach access roads 4 and 5. And that's going to be in the heat of the sun, away from the salt spray. It's going to be just drying, composting sargassum without any attempt to scientifically aerate it. You know, so, and I live back that way. The wind blows that way, so I'm a little concerned.
It's going to stink. You're going to have lots of crabs. I mean, you
Well,
know.
what about, like you say, you know, as it's self-composting, you know, the potential for spontaneous combustion?
Hold on, self-composting, is that because nature put it there, or because somebody piled it up and created their own idea of natural composting?
Well, that's what I'm saying. They're
They're
going
just
to be
dumping
piling
it.
the hell out of it over here.
That's not a natural process. That's not a natural process anymore.
You're concentrating
I'm
it.
cutting you on semantics, because when people take something that used to be a uniform layer at a specific depth and then pile it up into something else, now you're creating a problem.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I wonder, you think it could light itself off in the heat of the summer, or what?
I guess we'll get to find out.
Yeah, we're about to find out this summer.
4 days going to find
Realize
out.
that if there was a chemical spill, or if there was something that came out into the water, and that particular 8 yards of sargassum had that toxin in it, and then it started to heat up, it's going to volatilize at a different rate than another 8 yards that didn't come from any kind of toxic environment. They will not act the same way.
Well, fortunately, there's no petroleum rigs offshore that drop
Yeah.
cans, 5-gallon buckets. and
There's no plastics
55-gallon
manufacturing along
drums of
here.
petroleum
There's
products that mix in with the sargassum. That was sarcastic.
We've got some pretty good piles of it on the island, and we haven't had any spontaneous combustion, to my knowledge.
Yeah. But, you know, again, you're getting like that moisture from the sea, though. You get that salt spray. We're now, like right back here, just not even a mile from here, it's going to be backstacked on a connective road between 2 asphalt beach access roads.
I think David Parsons been doing that. Wasn't caught for a little while, and then they had their cease and desist order, so.
Let me just get it.
They had been doing it for
It's one of those
a year,
things.
so.
I'm thinking about it now.
He was
It's not
like,
until the 20th.
It'll
Me
probably
about
be
it, it
all right.
hasn't.
It'll probably be
So,
all right.
let's take this argument. In Houston, they have like a whole bunch of different compost places, and 7 people can have the same ingredients, stick them in their piles, and 6 of them will have no problems ever, and the other guy will literally blow up.
Yeah.
And we have to go out there and go, okay, dude, what did you do differently than everybody else?
I would imagine dry sargassum, as opposed to spontaneous combustion, if it was flamed, it would probably burn pretty darn
Well, the
good.
thing is, when you have a methane explosion, water will not put it out. You have to smother it. So you take this front-end loader with sand and you drop it on top, and that's how you get rid of it. If you try to put water on one of those things, you exponentially create a much larger disaster.
But I mean, if somebody theoretically had a beach campfire, not that those ever happen, but they had a beach campfire and some embers went, you know, into a big pile of dry sargassum,
It makes
composting
great
aside.
crackling when all the little things.
I know it does, it crackles, but I mean, does it flame up and burn readily? Not so much. I wonder if it's the salt in it that stops it from burning so much.
I don't know.
When it's dried out, there's just not much there.
It's not,
I
it
worked
pretty
in
much
the
just ends up
TC
being those
for a
little
long time, and
floats,
we
and
saw
that's it.
And they blow up
a lot of
great.
spontaneous
Like
combustion.
firecrackers.
Various piles, various things. We never saw any spontaneous combustion on sargassum because it was never taken inland and dried and all that kind of stuff.
Like they're about to start doing here.
But I have no idea.
But you were 30 years with the TCEQ, right?
31.
Everyone wonderful year.
Yes.
Hats off to you.
No more.
Yeah.
Life in the middle.
Well, seems like we're winding
I
down.
think we're there.
Yeah.
That looks like to me.
Any other issues that should have come out that didn't? I guess we can always send it to the website.
Well, we could have a sunscreen symposium and a...
Thank you.
I would offer that we'd be happy to host the next of these events on the south end of town, in case anyone.
Well, actually, now that the way you described how South Padre Island is now, in 1968, when I was down there, I was thoroughly unimpressed, but it sounds like it's cool now.
It's quite I love it. Quite remarkable. We have a lot more going on, and many, many good ways. We probably have a higher intensity of environmental protection emphasis than any place our size in the world. I can't step out the door without someone saying, "Wait a minute, don't step on that."
Yeah.
And that's good. For a tourism destination to also enjoy that emphasis is quite something. Our new birding center, birding and nature center, is going to be a big one. We've got more birders than any square mile either. Last year I got to meet Jimmy Carter and his wife. He's a big birder. And we have a lot going on. We'd love to share it. We'd like to come down next year. Or sooner. Your money's good all year.
Actually, that does look like we kind of have officially shut down.
Fizzled out. Dried up. Like a Sargassum. All righty.
Had that much to do.